Since then, we haven't kept step with European legislation, but there are moves to keep up. It's just that we've got to go through a long and lengthy process. One of the interesting bits of legislation is around batteries, which has gone through in the EU, and that means that batteries should be user replaceable, and that some of the bigger batteries, like for e-bikes or e-scooters, should be repairable themselves. And that's really important because those of you that are old enough to have had an early phone will remember that you should just be able to flip out the battery of a phone. So if you needed to replace the battery, you wouldn't even think of it as a repair. Whereas now it's a full-on repair. And I tried to do it myself and had to get a hairdryer involved. It took about 2 hours because it's glued in. You need loads of different types of screws, and that's just such a barrier to keeping things in use.
So the UK, of course, as you say, no longer in the European Union. But in the sense, the European Union is one of our biggest markets, and kind of vice versa as well. So in a sense, it would seem logical, if you were the UK, to sort of think about having legislation that kind of mirrors to a certain extent what's in the EU.
Yeah.
When do you think that the UK might start formally bringing in new legislation on repair?
Well, there was supposed to be a consultation around batteries last year, and it's delayed, and that's quite standard with consultations. And from what I understand, there are ambitions to keep up with the EU, but we just have to go through consultations. So if we haven't seen the consultation yet, it's going to be a few years before we get it in. But in reality, because we're a relatively small market compared to the EU, if manufacturers are making these changes for Europe, we should get the benefit of it. And we don't get all of them. But for example, if they're going to provide software support for a minimum amount of time, they're not going to not make it available to us in the UK. But it just means that we're not guaranteed to have all of the benefits. So we do need our own legislation. But what's quite encouraging in the UK is that they're currently working on a circular economy strategy. And that is the first time that there's really been a step back and looking at the whole system. Up until recently, all of the legislation in this area has been very focused on waste and very focused on recycling. And so this feels like a once in a generation opportunity to actually look at the whole system and look at how we can stop things becoming waste and keep things in use before we get there. So far ambition seems really high, which is great.
So in a sense, what repair offers is the opportunity not to sort of throw things away so quickly, but extend their life, as you said before.
Yeah.
We're talking extending the life of things for what, 3, 4, 5, 6 years? I don't know. And what does this mean for climate change? What does it mean for maybe jobs? What does it mean for, society as well? What are the, because some people might think, oh, that repair sounds a bit cute, right? But in fact, it could have a huge impact.
Yeah. Well, I mean, big picture, looking at resource use, for example, resource use is responsible for 50% of global carbon emissions, 90% of biodiversity loss. So the stuff we're taking out of the ground is having a massive impact, and that's all to make new stuff, right? So but if you look at kind of specifically at electronics, for example, the carbon emissions that are produced during the whole lifetime of, for example, a smartphone or a laptop. So that means from the moment that the resources are dug up to the moment it's kind of totally junked and put into landfill, 80% of those emissions happen before it even gets into the consumer's hands. So it doesn't matter how efficiently you use it. Of course, you should try and use it efficiently. But if you're going to replace your laptop or your phone every few years, then there's going to be this massive increase in carbon emissions. So we absolutely have to be, if we can double the length of time that we have them, which is technically feasible, you could make a huge difference to the carbon emissions associated with our stuff.
And there is a kind of movement growing in the UK and in Europe and elsewhere, I think, maybe in the US, for repair cafes. And I think we talked some time ago about this, but there is quite a large number, right, of these now in communities and cities and whatever, where people can go and see if they can get something repaired. I think many are voluntary. Some might have some local authority support. Tell us about that movement.
Yeah, so first of all, a repair cafe, because some people get confused by the name. It's not a physical location. It's not a cafe, but they're events, and they're usually about once a month, run by volunteers, and you bring your stuff, and someone will have a go at fixing it. It generally is volunteers, you normally get a cup of tea, which is why they're called a cafe. But they've been growing almost exponentially. Like the number of repair cafes in the UK grew by a third last year, and we're now up to about 700 in the UK. There's around 4,000 across the world, but we probably don't know the full picture there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this real sense of people are frustrated. People don't want to throw stuff away, and I think you don't have to be environmentally minded to feel that kind of sense of there's something wrong if you're throwing away something that you know that is probably fairly easy to fix. So people want to do that, and then people are taking it into their own hands and kind of just fixing for other people. And it's a really hopeful movement, and really exciting, just shows the demand for repair.
Yeah.
But it also kind of, I mean, the other role that repair cafes have is that there are some products that it's really hard to make an economic case for repairing it. So you look at something like a toaster or a kettle, where it's about 10 or 15 pounds to buy a new one. Generally, people won't pay more than about a third of the price of a new product for repair. So that means you've got about £4 to play with if you want to repair a toaster or a kettle. So of course, no high street repairers, no one who's trying to make a business wants to repair those products. So that's where repair cafes are really important to just kind of try and keep those things in use, and it almost has to be voluntary.
So I visited a repair cafe in Horsham in West Sussex, southern England, for those viewers who are from around the world. And these were all volunteers, mainly people, I think, who had retired. Some of them were electrical experts. Others were just using their intuition, in a sense. And it was quite fascinating to see a man trying to repair a coffee machine that a lady had brought in. And they were very happy because there were screws on the back that they could open the coffee machine. So that was kind of a plus. But then when they got inside, the coffee machine was simply not pumping the water. And it seemed to be some little rubber thing that was the problem. And this man who was doing the job said to me, yeah, the problem is, I don't know where to get this little rubber thing from. I have no idea where I can get it from, and I have no idea what it's going to cost. I just don't know what to do there. And this is part of the problem, isn't it? Getting the spare parts as well. Is this legislation going to help with the availability of spare parts so that repairs can actually happen?
Yes, in theory, but it has to be expanded to all of the products. And this is what's frustrating about legislation, is that it takes 3 or 4 years just to expand it for smartphones and tablets. And then we've got to get to all of the other products. There'll be loads of new products on the market by the time we've regulated all the current ones. So we do need something more holistic, and there needs to be something that is more of a push to provide spare parts. But that's a real problem. But then also what you were saying about the people in repair cafes tend to be retired, and that's something that we're seeing, that kind of repair skills are an aging thing. And we know that even for companies like manufacturers that offer repairs, there's guaranteed jobs, they're finding it hard to recruit new people, because people just aren't kind of getting into repair skills. So that's one of the things where we think there needs to be some real effort put into it to really kind of, we can't lose those skills, and we can't just get to the point where in 10, 15 years, there's no one to repair our stuff.
Right. So we need some effort as well to train younger people in repair.
Yeah.
And therefore that could offer what people like to call green jobs and in communities across the country. And
that's a really good point. And you asked about jobs earlier on, and it's been modelled that kind of that there are potentially 450,000 jobs in the UK across the circular economy, specifically in repair and reuse. The Chartered Institutes of Waste Management have estimated that we need about 80,000 jobs in just repair and reuse to meet our net zero targets. So there's jobs coming, but we have to train up the people, and be thinking about those things in tandem.
So the EU legislation is not just about the right to repair. There's a parallel piece of work as well going on in the EU, which is about design. Because again, one of the guys that was doing this repair cafe in Horsham, linked with this NGO, Sussex Green Living, he was saying that, you still see products coming along that seem to be designed to be obsolete because you can't get into them. And so this again is about designing things that make them repairable. Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually, when you were talking about coffee machines earlier on, there's a brand of coffee machine that's notorious because they've done a very cute thing, which is they've made the screws in the shape of a coffee bean. So it means you need a screwdriver that's the shape of a coffee bean at the end, which, you know, so it's cute, but it means it's just really hard to repair, and it takes it out of, it means it's not something that you and me can do.
Yeah.
So that's just a really an example. iPhones have a bespoke screw as well, but it's just that there are all of these decisions made that are just not with repair in mind. So there's certain things like we know what parts are going to break sooner. So they should be the most accessible. They should be the closest to the edge. They should be accessible with an easy screwdriver. But so often things are glued together, and you can't. This is something we hear.
You have to kind of smash them up to get anywhere near repairing them,
yeah.
and then they're trashed anyway. So,
Exactly. So, and I've had that exact experience where I've bought stuff to a repair cafe, and it's just not been worth it because you would have to break it up. So design for repair is absolutely crucial, not just for repair cafes, but also for repair businesses, because time is money. So if they're having to spend half an hour trying to get into a product, it's not going to be worth repairing it. Whereas if they know, if it's easy to get into, they know exactly how to do it, then it suddenly becomes a bit more economical to repair.
So cost is really important. You mentioned that earlier. Most people are not prepared to pay more than the third of the value of a new product on repair. They're not worth to spend it on repair. So price is really important. I live in Berlin. In Germany, there's still a lot of tailors on the high street there. And I take things to get repaired. And just altering a T-shirt that costs €6, the repair is €20, right? So it's kind of, maybe I'm a bit crazy, right? But I do it on principle. But there are ways of shifting the economic incentives. And you're part of a trial here in North London to try and incentivize repair among consumers, among the public. Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, so we're trialing a repair voucher scheme, and this is inspired and very much builds on a very successful scheme in Austria that has since expanded to Germany and France. So in Austria, it's been running for about 3 years, and we're doing the same thing. So basically, consumers can apply for a repair voucher. They then get 50% off the cost of a repair for electricals with participating businesses. And it's as easy as possible for the consumers, that they don't need to claim for it. The business then claims for the discount. But the idea is to just take that barrier away, so people are going into shops. I think, and potentially long term, it could make a difference in terms of repair businesses deciding, yeah, it's worth us trying to repair toasters and kettles now. Right now they're not, and it has to be a long term thing. But we're already seeing that there's really high demand. We're seeing that it's definitely benefiting people on lower incomes, and a lot of people are using it to repair things that have been stuck in drawers for ages. So again, there's all of that. That's part of the reason that people stick things in drawers, because they don't quite want to give up on them. So this is prompting them to kind of get them back out and get them repaired.
Yeah, one day I will get it repaired, sort of thing, but you never do. But this gives you an incentive to take along and have it done. Yeah. And that's gone. That's already started, and it goes to, is it September?
September at the moment. We hope that there's interest to keep it going for longer. Yeah.
So, overall, repair is part of an ecosystem. There will be some recycling, clearly. We won't have a completely repair economy, right? But it's part of the story. So in theory, we would have less recycling, more repair, some kind of balance here.
Yeah.
Because eventually things do come to the end of their life, don't they? And they have to be thrown away in some way.
Yeah, but recycling should be a last resort. So the mantra of reduce, reuse, recycle is the right order. So we should be reducing how much we're buying. We should be reuse is also really important. So obviously we're champions of repair, and we work with repair cafes, but often you can just reuse things, and actually it's a lot easier. You don't need to repair things, but it's so important. We went through an e-waste bin a few years ago, and we looked at everything that was going to be put in, and we found that a third of the electricals that were going in weren't even broken. And there were some examples that were like heartbreaking. There were examples of things still in their wrapping that someone had just got two of, and rather than try and send it back, they were throwing it away. That's going to be shredded, and then a few things are going to be taken out. It's so inefficient. So there's loads we could do with reuse and just diverting stuff. There's a lot that we could do with repair. Another 10% was very easily repairable, so that's about half of what we're throwing away that could be kept in use. And you think about the impact of, if we were to keep those in use, avoid making new things, and the impact on climate and biodiversity as a result of that is massive.
So what else can we conclude on this story? I mean, there are still things in the legislation in Europe that I know as campaigners, because you're linked to all kinds of groups in Europe and other parts of the world, that people are dissatisfied. You have an international repair day, I think, every year. When is that?
That's 20th of October.
And you're going to launch a campaign, or you're going to have a campaign about something to do with computers. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what's the craziness here?
Well, the craziness is that Windows 10 it expires basically in October this year. But Windows 11 will only work on certain laptops. So there's millions of laptops that are going to become obsolete when Windows 10 stops working. Now, there's been campaigning for years around this, and Microsoft has been very slowly they've made they've extended software support for schools at quite low cost, for businesses at a higher cost. And they've just announced that they will make it available to consumers for a year, but it's attached to kind of an upsell, and what's really frustrating is that they're kind of slowly seeing that this is not popular. They have kind of sustainability reports, and they talk about their green credentials. And meanwhile, they've made a design decision that will mean that millions of laptops are junked, and it's just not okay. Right. So we're trying to kind of shine a light on this because it is a scandal, but also it's just an example of what is happening across the industry. It shouldn't be allowed. It shouldn't be allowed that you can make a decision that's going to result in that much waste and that many new people having to buy new products. So that's where we need legislation about about how things are designed, about software support, about repairability and durability being kind of paramount when design decisions are made.
Yeah. So you've had some small wins with Microsoft. Clearly, one would like a bigger win by October. Because that is kind of built-in obsolescence, isn't it, in a sense, through the means of software.
Yeah, that's literally planned obsolescence.
I mean, I presume some very smart people that really understand tech stuff might be able to do some fix. But for most people, it's like, oh my God, it's not going to work. Straight down into the bin, right? And then out to the recycling center.
So there are lots of repair cafes that are doing kind of workshops, helping people move to a different operating system that won't ever expire. But software is intimidating for people. And I mean, I've had this exact, I've been helping my mum because she has a Windows 10 laptop. And I kept saying to her, I think they're going to extend it. So maybe hold off. But it was just making her really anxious. So she ended up getting a new one. I helped her get a secondhand one. But there'll be countless other people that are just, they don't want to think about software. They don't want to think about kind of, oh, well, if I wait this long, then I can maybe upgrade, because it's just more than what people want to think about.
So there's room for optimism across the issue of repair in the EU, but also in the UK. But there is still a lot of work to do in terms of actually wrapping our hands around the whole kind of consumer flow of all the zillions of things that are produced that we use. But we're off to a start, and it's a journey.
It's a journey. It will be a hard one, but we're starting to see that there's ambition to really tackle it, which is encouraging. Okay.
Super, Fiona. Well, it's been very nice to meet you here on We Don't Have Time. And thanks for coming to our studio.
Thanks very much for having me.
Okay. Great. So we thought this was a really good moment to just kind of have a little reflection on what we've been talking about, what we've been hearing from people here at London Climate Action Week in the We Don't Have Time studio. I've got Ingmar Rentzhoff, no stranger to our viewers, the CEO and founder of We Don't Have Time. Did you feel that you learnt anything in the last few days, or did it reconfirm some of your views about what's happening to our world as a result of climate change? Yeah, give us some thoughts.
So, I mean, London is a big city, and it's so many events, so it's hard to get into all the rooms because you need to multiply.
You need to be cloned. Yeah.
Exactly. But I can say that I think it was 2-3 weeks, there were a Hamburg Sustainability Conference. And it's a big difference what's been discussed here and what was discussed there. Mm-hmm. Because in that conference, climate was hardly talked about. They were avoiding that term because it's not, it's not, people are avoiding the term because it's not on the political agenda. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You don't see that here. Here is climate in centerpiece of the conversation. Mm-hmm. So that is of course positive, but it's also a little bit like those conferences. I mean, I'm not been working in climate as long as you have. For me, it's only 8 years. But I mean, one of the speakers we had yesterday, he was very interesting. Sir David King, one of the science advisor for
former UK government science advisor and founder of the Climate Crisis Advisory.
Yes.
Board or group.
And I really love when scientists speak up and don't sugarcoat things. Mm-hmm. And he had many points. But it's also, he said something that got stuck in my mind, and that is that they haven't moved anything in 20 years. That's not really true, because for 20 years ago, there were no green technology. They existed, but they were not scaling. And what we see today is scaling technology in many areas, in solar, in battery, but also in like sailing and shipping that we talked about yesterday. You have those exponential curves, and this interview you just had with the repair movement, that we're growing repair cafes exponentially. The thing with exponential change is that it's so slow in the beginning, so it's hard to notice it. But when the scale is coming up, and it's keep doubling and doubling, suddenly the change is appearing suddenly. And I think that the climate scientists that are really understanding the climate, they are so into the negative side because they see this exponential thing happening in the climate, where they are seeing that what's happening now is going to be out of control in just coming decades. It's already started, but it will be disrupting the whole society big time. They have a hard time to imagine the positive change because it's in the same journey. So what's happening here is that the climate is moving into exponential chaos, but the green transition is moving into exponential positive change. And what we see right now in the geopolitics, is that the fossil fuel power, the industry that are receiving billions and trillions of dollars in subsidies, are desperate because they know that they're going to trash the planet, but they want to squeeze out the profits while doing that as long as possible. But they see that they will not be able to continue to operate because of this disruptive positive change in the green transition. So what they are doing now is leveling up the fight and try to stop this change, stop those exponential curves by canceling science. That's why we have been talking about this campaign, Make Science Great Again. We need to call that out, because what I see very clearly is that the reason why we're not moving fast enough, why things are not happening faster, why Sir David King actually right, we haven't seen the effect those 20 years, and the political space is not moving at all. They don't understand that change are coming, either they want it or not. it's because those powerful sources out there, they are spending, according to Sir David King, and I have seen other numbers as well, a couple of billions of dollars to communicate why we don't need to change. And it's very efficient. It works very well. I mean, political movements like AfD in Germany, they have picked it up, and they are now going to their voters and saying that, please vote on us so that we can tear down all wind powers.
Yeah.
And they're winning the election. I mean, they're winning voters. So it works because it's an industry communicating all those craziness.
Well, they've like the Reverend Yearwood, who we had on yesterday, who this Black American minister, but also climate change campaign. I mean, he was quite clear, and I think we've heard it before. And there was a lady last night in our studios who said something similar. We've got to stop this kind of creation of a kind of perspective in some parts of society that climate change, action on climate change is a kind of an elitist thing, that it's only for the rich, you know, that they can kind of have the nice electric cars. And we're, us with no money, we are victims of, you know, net zero policies, as if it's somehow fighting climate change is a kind of social fight between the rich and the not so well off, right? This is just bullshit, right? But the oil companies have done a good job. The right-wing politicians are doing a good job about splitting society. You have it in the States, right? It's completely polarized as a nation, and it's polarized over climate change too.
Yeah, this is that climate kind of is elitist, is very much created by the ones that can control the narrative. And narrative is all about who is filling the void in the communication and media landscape. And it's a very, you know, it's an easy story to sell that it's the elite that are going to control you. Net zero will be your freedom, etc. And they're winning this, not because that their story is so good, but because there's no one out there pushing the other narrative. I mean, we know time, we have been around now for 8 years, but I mean, we have some millions of dollars that we can spend during those 8 years to try to push something else. And we're up against an industry that are spending billions of dollars in communication for the other side.
And lobbying of governments, lobbying of political parties.
That's part of the communication. I mean, when we bring in a policymaker and have an interview, that's also, you know, you influence the policymakers. Communication and lobbying is just another way of a form of communicating. And there is hardly, no one is putting up the money for climate communication. And here in London, there is so many events happening with non-profit NGOs doing those cute things. And I was at one of those dinners yesterday. I mean, they're doing great things. Nothing wrong with that. But the discussion came up, what can we do differently? Because people are seeing now that this is just not really work. We are in this situation. We're not having the momentum for climate policy, etc. And I said that, how much are you spending on communicating what you do? Yeah, we have a PR person working in our organization. Okay, how many people are working? We have like 100 people. Okay, so 1% of what you do are spent on the communication, and 99% are spent on talking, like just writing somewhere for yourself and have dinners with like-minded people. It's, I mean, if we want to change things, I think that we need at least half of the budget needs to be in communication. Otherwise, we will not get through. This is a communication crisis, and the money for communication is not really there. It's so struggle to get funding for communication. And if you look around, there is not many other platforms similar to We Don't Have Time. So it's not like we are competing. We are, I mean, the market is so small. And now with the new president in the United States trying to cancel legislation and everything, companies that have put up some money to communicate, they're getting scared. So many companies, they are actually not communicating at all. They're just doing what they are minimum legal required to do in a time where we need their voices more than ever. We have had people on this stage that were their last appearance because they have lost their job, because their employees have killed their initiative to communicate climate. And we have 450 partners. And I mean, I can count like on my hand, my fingers not enough for examples of companies and organizations we have been working with for a very long time that the person on the other end is not there anymore.
But it's not a shortage of money, is it? I mean, there's still a load of money out there. It's just basically being so risk averse and so nervous about, spending things on climate communications or other forms of climate action, right? They're just keeping their heads down right now.
Yeah.
I mean, this is always a time like this is when you need courage, right?
Yeah.
Courage of your convictions. I mean, we work with loads and loads of people that absolutely understand that, the world of the future, the world of the present, in fact, is a green economy, is green technology, is this kind of space that the old economy has had its day. It doesn't function anymore for us. It doesn't function in terms of job creation either, right? And yet they know all this, but at the moment, because of what's happening in the United States and also the pressure that the right-wing parties are putting on, say, the European Commission and elsewhere, they are nervous of spending the money, speaking about the challenge, and getting the job done.
Yeah. Exactly. And they think that we have so much more time that we can just hang along a little bit and the wind will change. The thing is that the wind will change, but not by itself. We need to change it, and we need to do the work now. Now is the moment in time where we either are going to break through or we're going to lose.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like a middle alternative. And I'm very worried, actually, because I don't see the mobilization around the future. I see that many people are still in denial of how much time we have.
Because the numbers Sir David King was talking about, the sheer volume of the meltdown of the Arctic right now. He talked about that if it carries on like this, the country like Vietnam will be underwater for how many months a year? I think 75% or something like the country will be underwater for at least 3 months, but I think maybe it was more. I mean, that's pretty terrifying. And I think people need to be reminded that this is a serious challenge, right? But we have all the money. We have nearly all the technologies we need right now, anyway, for what we need to do now. And we have all the policies. We've got a super agreement called the Paris Agreement. It's quite clear about what we need to do and what governments need to do. So there's no real excuse to sit back and say, oh, we're missing something, so we can't move now.
No.
And can I just say one last thing? So David King was also quite good about the United States. I mean, his argument was really quite simple, that in all his years, and I share his opinion on this because I had experience of it, the US was often at climate conferences and other environmentally related conferences with huge delegations trying to actually block things happening. And there've only been a few bright spots in that story. So now with Trump, we've got, it's not under the radar now. It's not just happening quietly at conferences. It's out in the full open. And so not much has changed, and people need to know that. So stop hiding and get out there and fight.
I will say one thing has changed. If you see, I mean, this is not the first time we have Donald Trump in the White House. So it's a big difference, and we need to acknowledge that. The first time, Donald Trump actually did a lot for the climate movement because he pointed out all the craziness by saying it out loudly, instead of doing like many other world leaders that are pretending that they are solving the climate crisis. He was saying like, I don't give a shit. And people mobilized, and you saw those
they mobilized in response to that.
And the engagement from the US business community kickstarted, and that led to ripple effects.
And cities as well.
And cities and many things. And I mean, we don't time, we will not exist because we were inspired of that man's
crazy moment.
But now it's different, because now it's not about that he's just saying that I don't give a shit and don't do anything to solve the climate crisis. He's doing everything he can to cancel science And if he's succeeding in that, they will take decades to build it up again, because scientific infrastructure, if you like have an observatory measuring carbon dioxide and you have a data series, you can't lose data, you will lose kind of the research. So it's many things. If you don't have satellites up in the atmosphere detecting things,
you're living in ignorance about what's going on.
It will take so many years to get a new satellite up there, etc. So this time it's different. So Sir David King didn't really talk about that. He talked about the
he didn't have chance, actually.
But I will give him no, we didn't have time.
No, we didn't have time.
But I will give him right, because what we also need to acknowledge is that the United States of America is one of the largest oil producing countries. They have been that for a very long time. And it's so easy to point a finger to Saudi Arabia and to other oil countries. I mean, I don't saying that Saudi Arabia is doing great, but I mean, it's also, we need to acknowledge that almost all oil producing countries are now expanding their oil production. And they are all saying the same story. We're doing this because there's a demand. It's a little bit having a conference for anti-smoking with the tobacco companies. And they are saying like, we want to stop producing cigarettes, but we see so great demand. And by the way, we're spending billions in marketing our product. It's delusional. So we need to address that. If you're making profit from oil, can you really be a climate leader?
But let's just flip that one around a little bit. Maybe they're now pumping and drill baby drill and doing all this right now because they've seen the S curves with renewable energies now overtaking fossil fuels in many places. They've seen the cost curves in terms of the price of renewables versus the price of oil, which is very volatile. And maybe it's a bit like somebody who's been told there'll be no more grapes tomorrow, and suddenly they buy all the grapes in the supermarket and stuff their face, right?
Yes, that's true. That's exactly true. Because if you look at the oil companies out there, you can see what they think of the future on the way they are spending their money in investing. And most oil companies, if they will believe in a future that oil plays a role, they will spending the money on research on how to improve oil production. They will spend the money on building the infrastructure in energy, etc. And they do that. But if you see how they really spend the money, it's just a fraction. Most of the profit they make, they're giving out to their investors. And what they spend money on, though, is communication. And lobbying, because that will help them make money for a few more years. So this is the frustrating thing. What we're up against here is an industry and a special interest, because it's not just the industry, it's also everyone that's gaining power from that industry. So it's not only oil. That they want to keep the party going on in their life. They want to stay in power for a couple of more years. And what the cost of that is our future.
Our atmosphere. So
it's not our atmosphere.
No, our atmosphere, which is the climate.
Our future. And this is what people still are in denial. Still here in London Climate Action Week and almost all climate conference we are at. People don't get that the climate crisis will not affect future generations. It will affect us. We're talking about a meltdown in our economy with 50% GDP.
15.
Losses. 50.
Okay.
50%, according to the leading insurance companies.
Okay.
And they know what they talk about. And I'm talking about like in 30 years. So that will affect everyone. And people I speak with, they think that we know that climate are going to change. We know that people are going to suffer. But I have the money, so I can just move around and it will not hurt my family.
They haven't fully internalized what is really at risk.
Because all those people with the resources, they have the money. They can't imagine 50% GDP loss. They just pretend that is just someone saying it. Oh, it's the leading insurance companies. I do something else. They can't get it in because the truth of that is that they need to change themselves, and that's where you see this. You know, they don't want to get it.
So this other narrative that's floating around, because we're going to have to wrap up in a minute, because but one of the other narratives running around is now it was manifested a little bit in what Anna Toni, the CEO of the next UN climate conference, COP30 in Brazil, said, and which was, well, there's lots of people out there, countries consuming oil, and therefore, you know, when they stop consuming it, then maybe we don't drill for oil, sort of thing. So, well, that's a bit like the smoking story, right? Well, they're still making cigarettes, we have to smoke them. You know what I mean? You don't have to smoke the cigarettes, right? Just because they're there.
Yeah, it's kind of this game that, you know, the oil have always played. And not only the oil industry, many environment damaging industry have tried to get the responsibility on the consumer.
Yeah, like recycling, right?
And what we heard just now was the repair movement.
Yeah.
And you can't have like people saying it's the consumer's responsibility when you design a product that will not last on design. And that's the same thing. I mean, if you see illegal drugs, of course you have a debate about the consumer, the drug addict, but you try to save him, right? But it's 10 years prison if you produce cocaine. And in some countries, even death sentences.
Yeah.
So why are we treating the industry causing death and destruction and 50% GDP losses as there's not their responsibility? Suddenly it's our responsibility. And if you live in a country that are powered by oil, you don't. It's hard for you to change.
What about plastic, right? Because plastic comes from oil. And they've done a brilliant job there. So now we put plastic things into little buckets, and then the local authority picks it up, that costs the taxpayer money, to then take it somewhere which might be a landfill, when in fact it's the product itself that's wrong. We're now doing their job. We're clearing up their mess every day when we put the little plastic thing in the bucket. Right?
I will now say something that is a little bit dangerous to say in front of the camera.
Okay. You could say it behind the camera then.
Yes, but I'm now saying it. If climate communication are just getting some more money, we can turn this thing around so that people understand that we will solve the climate crisis when we have enough people realizing that this is the producer responsibility. We just need some money for communication, and billions of people will realize that. And when billions of people realize that there's not their fault we're in this situation, but we need to regulate the ones causing it you can't do it over one day, but you need to have a face down transition plan. When that is happening, we are going to fix this. And we are the many. So let's just do it. But
we are the many,
we need to mobilize around it. And what I would like to see all those climate conferences is to start talking about the responsibility. The responsibility is not on all the companies. It's not on all the consumers. It's on the people and the companies and the leaders that are drilling and
it's about
digging up.
It's about 100 companies,
oil.
Isn't it?
Yes.
It's about 100 companies, which is a tiny percentage of the companies out there that are doing 80% of the damage, if I remember.
But just complaining about them doesn't give you and all of us a free card to use their product. I mean, I when I started Winter Time, I didn't fly for 5 years. I did actually fly here, but I didn't fly on oil because I don't want to give my money to the oil producers. It's possible to fly on biofuel.
Use the synthetic aviation
and
fuel,
many people see that is something to lower your emission. It's not about emission. It's about where you put your money. I don't want to put my money to oil companies. I don't want to put my money to Russia if they're attacking Ukraine, etc. It's all about the money. But in order for it to get effect, we need many people to do the same. And in order to get many people to do the same, you need to communicate. And in order to do that, you need money and the resources to turn this around.
Exactly. So I think we have to wrap up here, Ingmar, but thank you for your insights there. And I hope that was provocative enough for our audience to get out there and be, to be inspired, because there's no point in putting your head in the sand on this one. You have to get your head out of the sand and start looking forward.
What makes me so angry is that we are so near getting through.
Yeah.
It's not like we are far, far way off. We are extremely near or changing the direction of everything, but we need to break through. So now we need to push harder, work harder, do everything we can. And I'm so proud of everyone we have on our stages doing that every day. Let's just create a ripple effect and create a wave to doing it.
We will.
So thank you.
Thank you.